Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I will continue the talk on the series nutrients needed by our body with the title Bee Pollen and its nutritional value. This should be the last topic for the series talk, nutrients needed by our body, because I think we already covered for most of the health food product related for the past 3 months. I think this was the last topic. And why this topic is important? 2 times Nobel Prize winner Dr. Linus Pauling declared actually nearly all disease can be traced to a nutritional deficiency in human being. Although today seldom we hear about, especially in country that we are living, we are shortage of the food to eat. Most of the time we eat too much that causes too high. But why there is still this so-called nutritional deficiency? That's a very interesting. So today let's understand a food that is actually natural or highest nutritional value, complete and wholesome, and most importantly, when you eat, it is easily and readily absorbed and utilized by our body. And this is a very interesting food, bee pollen, and it's similar to what we talk about Lingzhi. Lingzhi have a very complete way of regulating our body. Actually, bee pollen is a very complete food that provide a complete nutrients needed by our body. So there is a bee pollen. So the combination of Lingzhi and bee pollen is actually a very good combination for our overall body health. But let's talk about bee pollen today. As usual, disclaimer, all the information contained in the slide are intended for general health information and educational purpose only, and are not intended to be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, treatment, or care. So let's start with the macronutrients and micronutrients, 2 of the important nutrients needed by our body. Macronutrients, I think most of you all know, is carbohydrate, protein, and fats. And in our daily intake of food, carbo have about 45 to 65%. What carbo does is actually provide energy source for our body, and another 10 to 35% is actually protein. I think protein is to build, maintain, and repair body tissues, and followed by fat, 20%. A normal intake of our food percentage is actually insulate, protect body organs, and grow and maintain cells. I think these are macronutrients needed by our body. Recaps. Okay, what is micronutrients? Besides macronutrients, we also need a small amount of nutrients, or we call micronutrients, in our diet to ensure our body can function properly. And these micronutrients include amino acids, enzymes, vitamins, and mineral. I think from our previous presentation, we all know that what is amino acids. Amino acids are the basic building blocks of protein, or we call the breakdown of proteins. And when you eat protein, our body need to break down to amino acids. Then we can be used and assimilated by our body. But some food actually contain amino acid straight away, so our body can absorb it without being need to digest this particular kind of food. And one we're talking about will be the pollen, I'm going to mention later. Enzymes, vitamins, and minerals cannot be manufactured by our body and must be derived from the diet, whether being meat or plant-based. Okay, so as I mentioned in the earlier part of the opening, why there is a reduction in mineral and in our foods in the current era. So reduction in mineral in fruits and vegetables. You can see that comparing year 1992 and year 1963, For certain mineral like calcium, you already have a deduction about close to 30%. Iron, magnesium, reduction about 21%. Phosphorus, about 11%, and potassium, about 6%. It means that the same amount of veggie you are taking, for example, spinach, now 1963 until 1992, for example, there is a reduction of these nutrients, mineral, or you can see in the slide, reduction in the vitamin in the spinach in 1950 from 150 mg to 13 mg per vitamin C per 100 gram of vegetable. So it means that the same amount of vegetable you are eating, but the same amount of mineral and the vitamin you are getting is less. I think that prompt me an interesting thinking process. I always tell people 30 years ago, supplements are not popular because nobody need supplement, being the multivitamin, being all the minerals. But in the current era, you look at the way, so-called the reduction of the nutrients in the food we are taking. So the school of thought where actually we need supplements to supplement all these vitamin or minerals needed by our body has become more popular. I think that is a true fact. And what caused all this drop? Well, extensive use of pesticide, I think, is one of the cause. You know that currently, except all those organic farming, most of the farming has to depend on heavy use of pesticides. If not, all the vegetable or fruits will not have a sustainable yield and for us to take. And over farming causes the erosion of the soil. The same plot of lands have been planting the same plants over and over again, and all this soil erosion has causes, even you can still see the same fruit coming, maybe in a smaller size, and the actual nutrients in the fruits or in the vegetable are really reduced. So I think this is one of the alarming signs. And the time taken from farm to reach our place, I think compared 30 years back, when I stay in a kampong, we can do our farming ourselves. We plant vegetable beside our house. So, but nowadays, take an example in Singapore, most of the being vegetable or fruits we are taking are coming from overseas. So, for example, if it comes from Malaysia, it has to be trucked in by truck. If the fruit come from, let's say, for example, all the apple coming from maybe USA or even Australia, you have to take the flight in a long journey and doing transits all the way. And every delay in all those fresh vegetable or fruits that reaching your place on your dining table, actually there will be a drop of all these nutrients. I think in Singapore, after the saga of the COVID-19, I think Singapore government has a target to increase the food production to meet the needs of the population from the current 10% to, I think, in near 5-10 years we need to meet 30%. I think with this, besides have more independent of the food needed for the population, I think that will actually increase the nutrient level of all the food that actually we are eating. I think that's a good news. And what can be done? Well, alternative source of the food can be from the sea or go organic, but I think that is a very expensive option. Grow your own, I think that's a good initiative. I think if you have a plot of land to spare beside you, why not? Well, as I mentioned, supplement has become more popular because people believing it's a way to supplement all the nutrients lost by consuming all the current fruits or vegetable and the food that I have now as compared to maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And as I mentioned in the opening, Nobel Prize winner Dr. Linus Pauling declared that actually in our era, a lot of diseases actually trace to nutritional efficiency. So today, I want to share with you a food that actually currently available called bee pollen. Why this bee pollen is so special? And let's start with what is pollen. Pollen is the most nutritious natural food of the world. Some people even commented that it's a most nutritious food after mother's milk. In the Federal Ministry of Health in Germany, recognize bee pollen as a medicine, have the therapeutic effect. That's in Germany. And the bee pollen is actually the male reproduction organ of a plant. It's gathered by bee if it's an insect pollinated, and then mix the pollen grain with flora, honey, and their survival. And the pollen actually is a main nutrition for the bees themselves. And there are two ways of getting the pollen. One is a wind pollination, is through blowing the pollen and doing collection by that way. But I think this kind of wind pollination tend to have the pollen tend to have lighter weight, and it's easy to bring pollen disease, for example, allergic problem. Insect pollination, mainly bee, have a better nutrients, pollen, and safer to eat. And you can see bee actually harvest the pollen from the flower, and this is how the bee look like. I think you can see actually bees attract to the flower by the nectar, but at the same time, all the pollens actually sometimes is actually attached to their leg. So when the bee flying back home, and most of the time the bee farmer will make a small host. So when the bee try to sneak it back home or beehive, and the pollen will actually drop off. So this is the way how the bee pollinated pollen being harvested by the farmer. And then pollen has containing more than 2,000 nutrients with no other to compare with. It means that no other foods can have so much nutrients compared to this single product called pollen. The content are 21 type of amino acids, 16 type of vitamin inclusive of A, D, E, K, and B complex like B1, B2, B6, B12, 16 type of mineral including iron, carbon, and calcium, 94 type of enzyme and coenzyme including lecithin, and 28 type of nucleic acids, which is important element for cell building, the body cell building. So let's talk about each one of these nutrients and is important to our body health. Amino acids, we know that is a breakdown of protein. Pollen has a great amount of protein, and they are mostly those essential amino acids needed by human beings, which can be quickly and easily absorbed by the human body. Essential amino acid called EAAS is actually the amino acid that needed by the body but cannot produce by the body itself. So you need to supplement this. And in one of the report, the EAA in pollen is 5 to 7 times higher than protein found in the egg, beef, and cheese. I think this is very encouraging. How about vitamin? Vitamin is needed by a lot of body functions, but in a small amount. So pollen has a quite significant source of vitamin, both fat soluble, such as provitamin A and vitamin E, D, and water soluble, such as B1, B2, and B6. They might be not a very high, but they are quite wholesome. I think that's the idea in terms of vitamin contained in the bee pollen. How about minerals? Minerals is an essential component of living cell, whether being heart, brain, nerve, muscle, blood vessel, red blood cell, bones, hair, intestine, etc. And pollen contain all these trace or elements, including phosphorus, magnesium, silicon, sulfur, iron, copper, sodium, calcium, and titanium. Similar to vitamin, it actually contains small amount, but it's quite wholesome. Enzyme and coenzyme. Enzyme coenzyme is very important because this is actually important in to digest our food. Pollen consists amylase and proteinases, which are helpful in effectively breaking down all these food molecules, so we can actually better digest the food we are taking. That's why taking pollen with the food together can help on digestion. Nucleic acid is actually for cell regeneration, also one of the important components in the bee pollen. Okay, and then a lot of people are asking, how can we compare pollen versus all the vitamin taking? Because actually vitamins are very important, and a lot of people are buying all the vitamin being the multivit in the market. So how can we do the comparison of pollen versus vitamin? And pollen is actually very safe because it's a natural, you know, side effect, cannot accumulate in our body. However, certain synthetic vitamin, or we call inactive vitamin, can difficult to digest. For example, vitamin A cannot be digested with mineral and fats. And I still remember in the SARS, I think that'll be many years ago. The first time happened in Singapore. Actually, all the people bought all the vitamin C from the pharmacies, and because there's a belief that vitamin C can boost immune system, and that's where the HSA of Singapore come up with a warning to people, out of the population of Singapore, saying that don't consume too much all these synthetic vitamin, it might burden your body. I remember this very clearly. So however, pollen is a bioactive vitamin, easy to absorb by body, don't need to be break down. And just like I mentioned, all these vitamins, sometimes they need to be digested. Some of them fat soluble, some of them you need different kind of thing to digest. And the absorption for bee pollen by body is definitely higher, can be 10 times higher. And just imagine, in terms of cost comparisons, pollen have more than 200 types of nutrients. If you compare the price, in order to find all the vitamins, mineral, enzyme, coenzyme, it might need more bottle of all these vitamin, mineral, even enzyme, coenzyme to replace one bottle of pollen. What we are mentioning here is bee pollen. So, cost effective, bee pollen is definitely more cost effective because it completes spectrum of more than 200 nutrients. Where compared to when you buy for certain synthetic vitamin in the market, one bottle might only have one vitamin, or sometimes they have a multivitamin. They can contain many vitamins, but there's always a limitation. And you can see, Yonkan pollen consists all the amino acid, all kind of vitamin, mineral, enzyme, coenzyme, nucleic acid. Even you opt for multivitamin who claim they have more vitamin type, but there is only one component of the bee pollen. So I think this will tell you that the benefit of pollen versus all the vitamin is actually a lot in terms of cost as well. So I will share with you some points of benefit of pollen to our health. Number one, in terms of cardiovascular system, pollen has able to reinforce the contraction of the cardiac muscle or the heart muscle, so it can prevent condition of arteriosclerosis, means that hardening of the heart vessel or arterial wall, and it can actually reduce hypertension and also cause all those blood capillary disturbance. And pollen contains lutein, an antioxidant who can strengthen capillary blood vessel and the correct cholesterol level. That in turn will prevent stroke and heart attack. In terms of immune system, pollen has able to strengthen the physics because it's actually good, pollen good for GI tract, and you know that the GI tract actually is the biggest immune system in our body. In fact, a lot of people say pollen might cause allergy. I think that is true, but bee pollen tend to be safer. But one study actually, pollen can actually so-called reduce the presence of histamine, improve many allergy conditions. So not only that bee pollen actually will not cause allergy, but it can help on the allergy condition. But as I mentioned, we have many, the pollen have a wind pollinated and bee pollinated. So for those people who have this pollen allergy, it must be very careful in terms of choosing of the pollen product. Number 3, for digestive system, pollen contain all the enzymes that were able to digest the food better. So then our body able to getting all these nutrients we need from the food. And pollen can prevent a lot of gastrointestinal disease. It contains natural acidic antibiotic. It's a very powerful antibacterial function. It can balance your gut flora and even heal things like gastric ulcer and also the condition of prolapse of the stomach, means that where your intestine might drop off. That is actually the strength that holding all the intestine in your stomach is not there. So pollen have all these amazing function, as I want to say. And pollen also energy booster. I think later I'll share you some testimonial. Many of all the people taking bee pollen that I know of, actually they tend to work OT, overtime, and they need a lot of stamina, or they're involved in the industry that need to work long hour. For example, in the hospital, or even all this electronic manufacturing. Obesity, I think this one is good, helping getting rid of excessive fat that build up under our so-called the stomach. I think you can see actually the sebaceous tissues. Number 4, pollen has been proven able to prevent chronic prostatitis. I think we're talking about prostate, most of the issue of the men. A successful rate of 80% rapid recovery from the chronic prostatitis patient. This is according to a research from Nagasaki Medical University. How about women? Help regulate and maintain regular cycle. I think that's why I always recommend pollen for women. And for those women near menopause, so age, I think a research from the gynae from Vienna, actually 90% of the patient taking pollen have proven against menopause disturbances. Fertility, I think pollen can stimulate and restore ovarian function and may assist in accelerating pregnancy. For male, it improves sperm count. I think in I remember so many years in doing Shuang Hor, I think we have 4 testimonial on how our Lingzhi and pollen improve fertility of a couple. Skin, pollen has to be known as the best skin food. Why? Because in order to protect your skin, you need amino acid and vitamins for your skin to really look radiant and soft. And it's also having therapeutic against skin inflammation, help acne and dull complexion problem. That's why I mentioned just now, pollen I always refer to the best skin food. Hair, you need mineral to promote hair growth and reduce gray hair. I think that's why pollen provide you all the mineral. And children, how about children grow? Pollen possesses growth factor. It can help kids with development growth and intellectual problem. That's why in the we always encourage parents to buy pollen for their children, especially if their children need to study very hard, then they need a lot of nutrients. So I think these are natural nutrients that's very good for children, no burden to them. And we are talking about bee pollen for the previous many slides. I want to introduce a product called Yongkien pollen. Yongkien pollen is a natural food with the highest nutritional value, most natural, complete, and wholesome that is easily and readily absorbed and utilized by our body. So why choose Yongkien pollen? Because top grade pollen grain sourced from pollution-free region in Europe. And I ever heard or see a report saying that there's some pollen sourced from mainland China, and the farmer has to give antibiotic water to the bees because the bees also dying. The bees are having a lot of diseases because of the pollution. So in order for the bee to survive through, so they have to feed them with antibiotic. So when the bee feed with antibiotic and they start to carry all the pollen from the flower, then it tend to be, the pollen will be contaminated with antibiotic. And our Yongkien pollen actually come from the Europe, and our pollen actually going through a very stringent safety and hygiene control, involving a low temperature sterilization and extraction process. Why low temperature? Because we don't want to damage the nutrient content of the product, and go through sterilization process will make sure that products are free from microorganisms and harmful substances. And if you compare the pollen that Yongkien pollen and other pollens, you have a very clear golden color, rich aroma, and a less fishy smell. That might be, yes, but it's less, and have a very appetizing flavor and smooth texture. Let me tell you something, a side story. I have a colleague last time ever buy a pollen from a shop, and we even see the leg of the bee. The bee, I don't know why the leg drop off as in the bottle of pollen. So I tell you that it's very important to choose a good quality of bee pollen, or else you got extra ingredient in the bottle of pollen you're buying. Okay. And who should consume the pollens? And children, as I mentioned, grow and actually important for their learning process. They need energy, so they need a lot of nutrients. As I mentioned, pollen is a natural product, will not have burden to the children. Although certain vitamins are made for children in the market, but I think being a natural type of nutrients, pollen is definitely better. Adults who want to stay young and pretty, especially for adults who need to work very hard, and also sometimes we have a lot of stress. I think with a lot of stress, you need a lot of nutrients. So pollen provide you enough nutrients you need. Old people improve immune system and stay healthy. Because old people might cut down the food intake, but pollen able to balance. So the shortcoming of all these foods that provide them with the nutrients needed by the body. People who are sick and recovering, so it's important all the nutrients in the pollen able to rebuild and repair cells in order to speed up recovery. And the people who are vegetarian are also important, because vegetarians will not have enough so-called nutrient from the meat or fish, and the nutrients in the pollen might able to supplement all these deficiency. And everyone who want to look good, I believe everybody want to look good. Am I right? So the recommended consumption, I'm basing on the capsule form of our product, Yongkien pollen in capsule form. Children 3 to 5 years old, about 6 capsules a day. Children 6 to 12 years old, about 8 capsules a day. For adult 10 to 16 capsules a day. You can divide the amount over 12-hour period, means that you take one dose in the morning and another dose in the evening. And as mentioned, pollen is generally safe for consumption. And however, I still want to give you a warning, because this warning is on every bottle of pollen that we have. Some people may be allergic to pollen, may cause shortness of breath and swelling. So people who are allergic to pollen still have to take with precautions. So this is a standard warning. Although 17 years in my career where I actually recommend all the health food for people, I'm not see a person who actually allergic to our Yongkian pollen, which is a bee harvested pollen, but we still have to be careful. Okay, there are 7 Q&A about pollen. This is a very common question. Of the 3 bee-related products, pollen, honey, and royal jelly, which one has a higher health-enhancing benefits? Well, these 3 categories of bee products are totally different. Pollen offers the richest and most variety nutrients I mentioned just now: vitamin, amino acid, mineral, enzyme, coenzyme, nucleic acids, and it's at the proportion of closer to what is needed by a human body. Honey, you can easily buy honey from the shop, comprises mostly starch, contain carbo, which is very low content of nutrients such as mineral and protein. Royal jelly, a lot of people opt for it because it let a person really look young. It contains mainly protein, might have some mineral. They are actually contain more protein, but not as the kind of proportion of the nutrients that needed by body as compared to pollen product. Okay, the next question: can diabetic people take bee pollen? Because bee pollen certain time you still find sweet. So the question that always asked, can diabetic people take bee pollen? Bee pollen has long been clinically used in the diet of diabetic, which has tremendous positive impact on the symptom of diabetic. One bottle of pollen contains glucose only half rise of ball. One bottle of pollen is 150 capsules. Okay, so it only have a glucose at half rise of ball. Bee pollen is rich in vitamin B6, which is important for function of pancreas. In the pancreas is where we produce insulin in order for our cell to absorb glucose. Bee pollen is rich in potassium that help diabetic with normal energy metabolism. And of course, as I mentioned many times, bee pollen contain over 200 types of nutrients, a well-balanced and varied nutrient to help improve diabetic conditions. Okay, let me start with some testimonial. Okay, I start with children. I think this is testimonial on children. Just to prove you how safe the bee pollen is, I might have shared this testimonial for many times, but this is to show you that actually these 2 kids actually finished one whole bottle of 150 capsules of pollen on their flight back from Australia to Singapore, because they take it as the tidbits, or actually when the flight take off, it tend to have a effect on the ear. You need to swallow something, so the parent give them bee pollen to swallow. All these 2 kids finish one bottle, which is 150 capsules, within 15 minutes. So if you this bottle is not safe, do the parent dare to give one bottle to them and let them finish within 15 minutes. So that is the gist of this testimonial. And this one is one of the testimonial and the Myanmar friends. He take pollen because he always need to work night shift and be continuous working. So he take 12 cap of Yongkian bee pollen, of course with other Shuang Hor product, and let him have the kind of full vitality, even long night of a continuous night shift. Same testimonial apply for another Myanmar friends who used to work as a nurse in a Singapore hospital. He worked as an ICU nurse, and he had to take bee pollen because he always worked night shift and continuously. And this pollen help you to have the energy to work through all the night shift, and he also commented her facial skin even look good, even continuous night shift, and her periods or menstrual cycle also more stable after taking bee pollen product. And this is the testimonial I like the most. I think this is my most oldest customer. I think when he do this testimonial, he's 103 years old. But at age of 103, he has limitation of food he can take, because most likely this person, Mr. Tan, not able to chew a lot of things. So the doctor give constantly 10 capsules of Yongken bee pollen daily, and he also take our Luchun tea and proteins. And if I'm not wrong, and he passed away. He passed away only about 2 years back, at about 103 or 104 years old. So I think this is very good. For old folk, bee pollen provide you all the nutrients needed. I think another Myanmar friend, 62 years old, he take Yongken bee pollen. Okay, I think with this bee pollen and other product, he's healthy and the blood pressure is controlled and the normal. And he also need to work night shift, but he always work with a good energy and spirit, and seldom fall sick, and never take medical leave for work for many years. Besides taking pollen, he also take other Shuang Hor product. So in conclusion, nutrients imbalance over a period of time can caused by irregular eating habits, or just the foods that we are taking now are really lack of nutrients, and these will eventually cause degenerative diseases. Pollen with the complete nutrients for our body, able to help cell degeneration, speed up the metabolism rate, and prevent diseases. And if you take Lingzhi together the bee pollen, that actually enhanced the absorption of body with the Lingzhi. So I would say it's a perfect natural food on earth for our body health. I think this is what I want to share about this product, bee pollen, today. Thank you very much.